All right, welcome everybody. Here we are with Chelsea Roff, the director and founder of Eat, Breathe, Thrive, which is a nonprofit organization that aims to help people with food and body image challenges. So welcome, Chelsea. Thanks for being here.
Thanks. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, you wanted to start by talking a little bit about Eat, Breathe, Thrive and what you guys are doing.
Sure. Yeah. So Eat, Breathe, Thrive is a nonprofit organization. Our mission, like Stacy said, is to prevent and help people fully overcome food and body image challenges. And we do that actually through yoga programs. So it's relevant to all of you guys watching. By food and body image challenges, I don't mean just eating disorders. We're talking about people who eat too much, people who eat too little, people who don't feel good in their body, which, is, I think, like most of us at some point in our life, right? So a lot of the people who come through our programs maybe just went through a life change, so went through menopause, or just had a baby, or just went through a divorce or a loss, and might find their relationship with food is kind of a little disrupted, or they're not really feeling good in their own skin. And so what we do is we offer programs that incorporate yoga. They incorporate community, so like a supportive group of people who sort of get you. And then we also incorporate service opportunities and volunteer activities to help people, just feel good about themselves and build a compassionate relationship with themselves.
Awesome. So you have training programs that train facilitators to do this in different regions. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah. So there's kind of two arms of our organization. We have trainings and we have programs. And that all kind of comes to, people often ask me, oh, where is Eat, Breathe, Thrive based? We don't have a central location. So if, let's say that, you've got a friend who's dealing with an eating disorder, and you're like, oh, I've heard about this organization that uses yoga to help people overcome eating disorders. We don't want your friend to have to fly to Los Angeles to get help. So our trainings train yoga instructors and mental health professionals and educators in their own community how to run programs. And our programs, of course, are the programs for people who need help. Those are run in schools, those are run in yoga studios, in community centers, and even in hospital settings for people dealing with full-blown mental health conditions.
It's so amazing to see how much you guys have grown and how many different areas you've branched out into. It's so incredible.
Yeah, I love it.
I want to talk to more in a moment about the yoga part and how you use that. But before we do that, I want to hear about your yoga journey just a little bit, and so how you got started in yoga and how it's brought you to where you are now with this.
Sure, it's fun to share with Stacy because we go way back. So you were a big part of my yoga journey. So gosh, maybe I'll start a little bit before my yoga journey started to kind of, contextualize how I got there. I had a pretty difficult bout of anorexia in my youth, which probably isn't surprising given the work I do today. Dealt with an eating disorder probably starting around the age of like 8 or 9. Like it started pretty early for me, and got bad in my early teens. And I'd gone in and out of treatment and had a few bouts of treatment. And when I was 17, when I was 16, I had a pretty bad stroke as a result of the eating disorder. So I got super sick. And when I was 17, I was blessed to get a really, really good treatment program. So I was in a hospital in Dallas where actually Stacy and I met for about a year and a half. So my yoga journey began right after that hospital stay. I got out of the hospital and I was doing way better, right? So I'd been in a hospital for a year and a half, and I'd had a meal plan, and I got lots of group therapy and lots of psychotherapy, and was doing a whole lot better, but I still didn't feel good in my body. I still had a really difficult relationship with food, largely because I didn't feel hunger, and I often didn't feel fullness either. I just kind of had a piece of paper that would say, okay, Chelsea, eat 600 calories at 9 a.m. and eat a 250 calorie snack. So I didn't have a real relationship with my body's needs. And I was just anxious. I'd been living in a hospital for a couple of years, and I didn't really know how to operate in the world. And even with all that therapy, I wasn't real good at calming my body down when it got anxious. Like I can now look back and go, oh, you were having anxiety. But at the time, it just kind of felt like the world was spinning out of control. And I fortunately had a great therapist who said, I think yoga would be really helpful to you. So that's how I got into yoga. And I was one of those resistant yogis.
No.
I mean, not by the time I met Stacy. By the time I met Stacy, I was fully in. I drank the Kool-Aid. But initially I was sort of like, yoga's for like wealthy white women in their 40s while their kids are not my thing. Right. And I thought it was kind of fluffy and slow, and I'd been an athlete growing up. So I was like, I'm going to go for a run. I'm not going to do, these stupid stretch poses. But something about it really hooked me. I actually think that the thing that hooked me was probably the first teacher I had. She was really charming and funny and charismatic. Her name was Diana, and she's just a ball of light. Like, she's just so great to be around. So that was probably what first hooked me. But after I'd gone maybe 6 weeks, 7 weeks, I found myself wanting to go back more and more. And it's probably that like little yoga high you get right after a practice. That was probably what got me going back. And over the years, I mean, well, you could go way into this, but I think probably the shortest way to sum it up is I found yoga to be kind of this like sneaky practice that, without me meaning to or without me intending for it to happen, started to change how I related to myself. So I was better able to sense when I was feeling anxious, and I was better able to go, oh, your heart's beating out of your chest, or your stomach's growling right now. Might that be that elusive hunger thing that, that you say you don't feel? Or your body's getting really hot right now. Like maybe your nervous system's kicking into high gear, whatever it was. And then I got so there was the awareness piece. And the second piece was I got better able to kind of have a conversation with my body, so that when I was aware, okay, your heart's speeding up, I was able to go, oh, there's this tool that I learned in yoga class that if I take 6 deep breaths really slowly, I can actually slow my own heart rate down. So it was like this piece of being able to both be aware of what was happening in my body, and the neuroscience term or the psychology term we use is self-regulate, an ability to calm my body down when it was feeling crazy.
Yeah, right.
That's the short answer.
Yeah. And then you became a yoga teacher, and then well, I love that you say that it's a sort of sneaky practice, because I often say that yoga can happen on accident. Like, I mean, I don't know. I think I was just talking yesterday with Deborah Deal, and I was talking about how I love the fact that people just show up to yoga as a physical practice. Like, and a lot of people do. Maybe you were coming because you had a good recommendation from your therapist, and you maybe sought it out for other things, but so many people show up for just that physicality. And I think that's a beautiful thing, because it's like this immediate need we know we want or have, this physicality thing. And then yoga often happens by accident. Like you described. Yeah.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. And to be honest, like, I think the only reason I was really going to yoga is because it's for the physicality piece. Like, yes, my therapist had recommended it, but it was also the only form of exercise. It was the only form of exercise I was allowed to do. Yes. So I was like, all right, if like I can, like, it was, the weird thing is yoga helped me love my body much more, but I went to yoga to fix my body. So it just transformed the entire intention that I've come in with, which is,
And then you described you started to have a different relationship with your body. So you were starting to tune back into maybe sensations and things that were happening that you had probably pushed away or had been avoiding for a long time. And so would you say, like, I'm imagine, so I want you to talk about, how did you develop, like, I feel like you had this therapy thing going on and you had this experience, but then you had these other new discoveries. And at the same time, you were studying psychology at UTA, right? And so I imagine things were working and coming together that led you to what you're now sharing through yoga.
Oh, yeah. So there's 2 parts to this, but I'm going to slow myself down and start with the first part. Yeah, like, I mean, I was studying health psychology and specifically psychoneuroimmunology in university, right as my love affair with yoga was starting. And I mean, you know me really well. The nature of my mind when I like something is to want to figure it out. So I'm going to yoga classes and I'm going, wow, I have this like, feels like a happy drug. Like, why do I feel so good? And oh my gosh, I'm starting to feel hunger and fullness signals again. And I wanted to figure out why it was working. So of course I'm studying like how the nervous system works and the relationship between the mind and the immune system in university. And so I went to my professor and I said, can we do studies? Like, can I do a study on yoga for breast cancer or yoga for HIV? So it was cool to have that intellectual thing happening at the same time. Because I think it better enabled me to utilize the practice for the exact things I was dealing with. Like, I think you can over intellectualize some things, but to know, hey, there's actually something happening here. There are breathing practices that can calm your nervous system down, and there are other breathing practices that, just based on how your nervous system works, can ramp your nervous system up when you're needing energy. So having that kind of foundation of, this is how my body works, and then be discovering this practice with all these beautiful tools in it was just a really good way to kind of start applying them. Oh, and now I've forgotten the second part of that answer.
Well, maybe it'll pop back up.
Were you
well,
again?
Let's see. I just mentioned that because you were getting into the practice, you had been in this psychotherapy setting. You then were discovering these new things in your body, like getting back in tune with body sensations. And that my guess is that, you know, beyond you being curious and, you know, studying all these things and figuring them out, you were also at the same time shaping this beautiful experience that you now share with your students and with Eat, Breathe, Thrive. I imagine that was a huge part of the shaping.
Oh no, yeah, absolutely it was.
Yeah.
I just remember, the other thing that occurred to me when you asked that question initially was that yoga, sometimes when we talk about these things, it's really theoretical and like, it's like, oh, yoga has all these tools, whatever that means. And yoga can help you calm your body down. But to give, you know, if someone who's watching is new to yoga, it actually happens like in every single yoga class. Like, you'll be in a warrior pose and maybe a teacher will say, notice the sensation on your inner thigh. That's exactly what we're talking about with that. Like, it happens even in like the super physical classes. Like when you're in a yoga class and you're tuning into your thigh or your shoulder or the feeling of your foot on the ground, you're building that skill or that ability. It's the word for it is interoceptive awareness. So your ability to sense what's happening inside of your body. Yeah, and Stacy, I've told this story 1,000 times, but as that was happening, the moment I remember it kind of shifting from it being a personal practice that was benefiting me and you know, really being this deep dive into how can I use yoga to build a healthier relationship with my own body, to how can I offer this practice to others and maybe offer some of the tools that have transformed my life. This is, you know, 4 or 5 years into it. I've probably reshaped this memory in my mind, but I remember having a conversation with you right after teacher training. So I was also resistant to teacher training.
I remember.
I was like, I don't know. I don't want to be, I'm a neuroscientist, not a teacher. But I went through teacher training and I remember having a conversation with you. And I think I said something like, I feel really weird in my life. Like, something's off or something's different and I don't know if I'm comfortable with it. And you were like asking about it. And I think I said something like, well, everything feels so light and easy and like I'm smiling all the time. And you laughed and you're like, oh, you're happy? like that's what feels weird. I think you're happy. And we had this big conversation and I think I told you that I think I am happy and it scares me a little bit because I'm afraid like I'll get used to happiness being there. Like if happiness is around too long, I know it's going to go away because I've had this experience before. Happiness never sticks around. And if it goes away, I'll miss it because I'll have gotten used to it being here. And I remember you told me that the only way to keep happiness coming into your life is to offer it out like a flow. So if you can't hold on to happiness and you can't push it away. Like it's like a wave. Like you don't cling to the wave when it comes in and you don't push it away when it comes out. But if you want it to keep flowing into your life, like that natural cycle or flow, then you offer it out. And that was where, that was kind of a turning point. That's what I remember that conversation with you as being like a turning point. Yeah. And going like, oh, maybe this practice isn't just for me. Maybe there's something I can do to offer it to others that would be beneficial, and then selfishly would keep that happiness flowing into my life.
Yeah. And I've seen that in you. It's like this little tumbleweed, like you just went and did it. And like, it's just gotten bigger and bigger, and you just exude happiness and joy. And it's so cool to see you doing everything that you're doing.
Yeah. It comes back. The happiness. It's the flow.
Yes. 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 Yeah. So right now with your program, like what is it based around as far as what do you see within yoga as, how does it transform? How do you break that down into a concrete teaching? Like what are you sharing with your facilitators, and maybe what part of yoga is the most transformative part? Not that you can isolate it, I know, but how do you start?
Can you pick one? I mean, I don't think I could pick one component, but I mean, I would, well, maybe I'll go. So after we had that conversation and I decided, okay, maybe I'll offer this out a little bit. I avoided everywhere but eating disorder treatment centers to offer it back out. Like, it was like, okay, I'll teach you in a juvenile detention center and I'll teach you in a homeless shelter. Yeah. But I didn't want to work with people with eating disorders because it's too close to home. And it was like, I don't want to be reminded of that time in my life. And when I actually had an old doctor ask me to come and do a talk at his hospital. He's like, hey, you exude, you're happy. Like, how about you come and like let other clients know that this is possible? And I owed him a favor, so I did it. So I go and do this talk, and talks turned into yoga classes. So basically I started doing talks at eating disorder centers, and I found that I kind of liked doing that. It was really nice to just be back with girls who were like sisters to me and go, hey, I've been there and it's really freaking hard, but it felt really gratifying. And I got them and I wasn't freaked out by them. And eventually they, asked me to do yoga classes. So I started doing yoga classes, and this gets to the heart of your question. I found that yoga wasn't really enough in that setting. And maybe that's just my kind of judgment, but these were girls and guys that were at like a really difficult time in their life. And they, had basically been taken out of their home setting and put into a hospital. And all of their coping mechanisms, unhealthy coping mechanisms, had been taken away from them. So they weren't allowed to drink too much anymore. They weren't allowed to starve themselves. They weren't allowed to purge. They weren't allowed to binge. And I'm coming in for like an hour a week and teaching a yoga class. And did it help a little bit? For sure. But what they were really, they'd get done with yoga and they'd say, can we talk about what just happened? Like, I had this big feeling come up, or I was in this pose and I started crying and I don't know why. Or my stomach did this funny thing and blah, 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 blah. And so I asked the doctor on duty, I said, can I have more time with them? Can you put like a therapist in there with me so they have time to process and just talk about it with one another? Because one of the beneficial things about yoga, and maybe like one of the most healing components, is the community piece. It's like you can practice alone on your mat, but to be able to share a practice with one another and connect and communicate with one another about it can be really powerful. And it can help us put voice to our experience and better understand our experience and grow from the experiences of others. So that piece happened. And then I just found there were themes that this population really wanted to work on. There were specific ways this practice seemed to be really beneficial to them, and that became a curriculum. So it was like one piece of the curriculum. It's a 6-week program now, and back then it was a mess. It was like 3 days for a little while, and then it turned into a 3-week program, and it's been 6 weeks now for a solid 4 years. So I don't think it's gonna change too much. But one of the weeks of the program is focused on what we were talking about, inner awareness. So what are the meditation practices and the yoga practices we can use to rebuild our ability to sense when we're hungry and when we're full, and to maybe build up our ability to distinguish the difference between when we're feeling emotionally hungry and when we're feeling physically hungry, and how those things cross wire. And so I pulled practices from yoga and from Ayurveda and from meditation that had helped me specifically with that issue. And then we built a whole curriculum around it. So there are 6 of those. Yeah, I mean, that's such a long-winded answer to your question. But I think the 3 pieces, if I had to shorten it into like a 3 bullet point answer, the 3 things I found most beneficial that are now the core values of our program was 1, the community piece, which I talked about. I think that's so important, and it's not unique to yoga. There's lots of practices that include that community piece, but I think that's why lots of things work for many people. The embodiment piece, so the ability to sense what's happening inside of our body and have that dialogue with our body. And then the service piece, like, okay, you're now in like a good spot, like I was, now give it back to somebody else. And you might find that like, you're not so interested in relapsing into those behaviors that kept you stuck for a long time, because your life is meaningful. And, you know, there are things that make you get up in the morning. You're like, holy moly, I'm so excited to wake up today. I don't have time to starve. I don't have time to bend.
I love that. I love that you added the service piece. I think that is brilliant and makes so much sense. And I love that you, the whole community part, because, when you first told your yoga story, the first thing you said was, the teacher was just so bright. And like, that's why I came back. And isn't that the truth though? It's like, that's what we're really craving, is that connectivity that sometimes that's difficult to articulate. And I think you agree too. Like that's, it's really hard to isolate how yoga works and how it helps, but that is such a huge part, is that connectivity.
Yeah. And I think it's embedded in the yoga tradition, I mean, yoga means to yoke or to connect, right? And that's applied so broadly. With the service piece, I think that's a form of connection. You go to karma yoga, like that's a core teaching and philosophy in the yoga tradition. So we've gotten so focused on the physical components of yoga in the West over the past few hundred years, but if you dig deep into this tradition, it's asana is like one very small part, or the physical practice is one very small part of a much, much bigger system for building a happy and healthy life.
Right. And I think it's maybe in the West and other places too, but just this approach to yoga where it can become very, there's an isolation factor to it. And so like working on myself and my inner self and my body. But I like to think that, the way if we were to judge or see how our practice is working, it's how we are connected to those around us. And I don't know, I think it can be confused as that sort of that practice that kind of brings us, because we think of it inward noticing and inward practice, but it's not to stay in here. It's just a reconnecting so that we can connect out here.
Yeah. I mean, if we're not careful, our yoga practice can get like a little selfish. I think and not just yoga. I think it's happened, again, probably in other places than just the West, but in the health and wellness community, sometimes we get so focused on our own ailments and so focused on these things that we want to fix and these things that we think are broken inside of us, that we've actually taken ourselves away the thing that I think can help us most, which is connection with others. And I see that happening a lot in the yoga and wellness community. Like, oh, I'm going gluten-free because there's all these things wrong with my diet and da, 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 da. And it's like, it would just take your eyes out in the world for a second to the people around you. And you might find that some of these ailments will actually remedy themselves just by not looking at them all the time.
Exactly. Well, the course is being well in a digital age. And so those that I'm partnering with at the Link Lab at UTA, their expertise is studying learning, and especially learning as it's being presented now in a digital age, and just really overall how this is affecting us, not only in bad ways, but, in good ways also. But I think that in a lot of ways, we could parallel this whole relationship with food and this whole digital thing in a way too. Do you think like it can be very, very similar sort of addictive sort of behavior. And then, using yoga or, facets of yoga to help as an intervention with that sort of thing. What do you think about that? What do you think about the digital age and, just using these practices to support that?
I don't know what I think about it. I'm actively contemplating it because I'm in it. Like I'm in it with everybody else.
Here we are.
So, I know, right? Talking like on one hand, I'm talking to my friend in Texas and I'm in California, and I have friendships and relationships with human beings on the other side of the world, literally, that I keep up really well thanks to the digital age and social media. And then on the other hand, I find myself out in public places surrounded by people, staring at my phone and feeling kind of empty inside and searching for some, like, without even knowing that I'm doing that often. And I go on phone breaks, and like for a week, I'm actually pretty good about it. Like if I'm on holiday somewhere, I'm like, get that phone away from me for a week. Many people are very attached to it, and I find I feel better. So I don't know. I don't know whether it's a form of addiction. I don't know if it's evolving our relationships with one another and ourselves in a positive way or a negative way, or more likely both, like the answer is to everything. I do know that the way technology functions feels very addictive. Like I've got these two boys that I'm absolutely in love with. My friend recently had kids, and they're 1.5 years, and they're here. And one of the things I've been fascinated with in seeing them grow up over the past 1.5 years is, without knowing anything about an iPhone, since they could open their eyes, they were magnetized toward that thing. And it creeps me out a little bit. It's weird, but it's the way that, this gets to the like super spiritual stuff, but it seems to be the way that consciousness, our collective consciousness, is choosing to evolve in this moment. And so I'm kind of in it going, this is pretty weird. This may not be a good thing, or, maybe it's okay. Maybe we're evolving toward an end we can't yet see that will take us to some new, I don't know. I really like virtual reality too. So like, not that I'm really nerdy and techie, so I won't ixnay it all together. What do you think?
No, I agree. I think, here we are. This whole course is a digital online course. And so it's a really interesting thing to be discussing this topic, and presenting these, ways to support well-being in the digital age. But I think you mentioned it. You said I'm really good at it, but I don't know that everybody has the ability at this. I see my teenagers, and I think I don't think they're really good at and even myself at times, I'm not really good at getting disconnected from, I can make a conscious choice and do that. But I do find myself with these, how did that get in my hand again? What am I doing? And so I think just, being really honest with myself and seeing that happening. When it becomes a subconscious, I don't even realize, why am I checking this email again? I don't need to check this email right now. There's something to be curious about there. But I think that I don't see it as a bad thing, though. I think that it is what it is right now, and it is the way we're evolving. And it's just another thing to self-observe around. If it wasn't technology, it would be something else that our humanness would be showing itself, right? When, whatever it may be. But it's interesting. It's interesting to have children raised in this era where that's just what they know. We remember a time. I remember a time of having 3 kids and no cell phone, and I remember not having email and not having a computer. And I remember getting our first computer, this big dinosaur. And so it's really interesting to see the differences in, myself and my life, my upbringing, and then my kids, where that's all I know. So, if anything, it's a great tool to self-observe around and to learn more about ourselves, I think, through.
Yeah. And it's tying a bow around it, but I do think that's where the yoga practice is so beneficial. So it's like, I can't stop the evolution of technology as it's moving, and pretty hard to exist in, at least in the States today without a smartphone, but I can strengthen my ability to self-observe. And with that ability to self-observe I think comes with more conscious choice. So it's okay. I'm watching myself pick up my phone frantically, and I can observe, and when I notice it, if I've strengthened that inner muscle of being able to notice myself, then I can pause and go, what's really happening right now, Chelsea? Are you looking for gratification from someone? Are you bored? Are you feeling anxious? Are you needing stimulation? Like, what's going on? And then I can choose to keep engaging with it. No, I'm bored.
Exactly.
What's going on Instagram?
Consciously.
Or not. Boredom for a moment,
It's kind of cool if you're practicing that, like if our smartphones are forcing us to practice that, well, if we're strengthening that awareness with this device, well, then probably that's going to strengthen our awareness and many other facets in our life as well.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah.
Here we are.
Here we are.
So what's next for you, Chelsea? What are you, what direction are you going in?
So we were just talking about this before our interview. My next big life goal over the next 2 years is to get empirical research done on the program. So we've had this program that's run pretty well in multiple settings for past 4 years, and it's got really good materials, which means it's manualized, it's systematized, it's replicable, it's scalable, and we've got it there. And I think the next chapter will be having some independent researchers come in and go, is this really doing what we think it's doing? Does it help people eat more in accordance with their body's needs? Does it help them feel more at home in their own skin? Does it help them feel more connected to others? All those questions. So we're doing randomized control trials on it in the next couple of years. We just partnered with the University at Buffalo. So we'll get hopefully 3 done in the next 2 years, and big lofty goal, which I'm not afraid to shoot for, is to get the program covered by insurance companies. That's I want people to be able to go to Aetna and say, I want to sign up for this program and pay a copay. Because I think that's probably the biggest barrier for many communities to getting the support they need and the help they need, and the tools embedded in the yoga practice is cost. So if we can bring down the cost and get government agencies and health insurance companies and educational institutions to support it, that would be awesome.
Awesome. And so that's your hope for the result of the new research direction that you're going.
Yeah. I mean, realistically, with these kinds of things, we're going to get 3 studies done in the next 2 years. The other programs that are covered, if you look at other 8-week programs or 6-week complementary programs, they have 2,000 studies behind them. So you do 3 studies and you hope that those 3 studies show good enough results that a whole bunch of other researchers go, yes, we're going to study this. And so it's usually what do you call it when it's a cycle that keeps on going, not a ripple effect, but a domino effect. That's
domino
what it
effect.
is. Yeah. So one bite at a time, we'll get the 3 out, and then talk to me in 10 years.
Yeah. Oh, I will.
Or 5.
5. We'll start with 2.
Yeah.
How about 1?
Yeah. But there's some really good acupuncture is covered by insurance. Mindfulness-based stress reduction is covered by health insurance.
Wow.
So there are practices complementary programs out there that are covered by insurance. And I think if we all work together, if the healthcare providers and the yoga teachers come together and say, okay, let's systematize this, and then let's look at it objectively, we've got a good chance of making it available to a lot more people who need it.
And talk about a huge paradigm shift in Western medicine when that starts happening.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Huge. Yeah. That's awesome. That's something to be hopeful for sure.
Yeah. Let's do it together.
Yeah. Let's do it. All right, Chelsea, anything else at all that you want to share?
No, thanks for having me. If people want to get in touch, you can go to eatbreathethrive.org. And there's a contact page, and we're happy to hear from you. And we work with yoga teachers and educators and mental health professionals and everyday people. So if this is something that appeals to you, connect, please.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Thanks, Chels.